Lost Valley Sanitary District regular board meeting to order December 18th, 2019. Roll call.
Cockney,
Here.
Kelly, absent. Biggs, here. Philip, here. Worsting,
Yes, ma'am. Everybody rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. With that being said, let's adjourn to closed session. Let's continue open session. And we have nothing to report out. Number 6, approval of agenda.
Okay, I will read agenda items 11, 12, and 13 to just after 7.
Anybody have an issue?
Is that okay? You may get a committee report.
Yes, I agree with that. Clear
Okay.
person, I'll let it come later.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Okay. 7, real quick. Open time for public to raise, well, thanks. Open time for public to raise items not on the agenda or for future agendas. Anyone wishing to address the board of directors on matters within the district's jurisdiction but not on the posted agenda may do so. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. The board may not take action on or discuss items not on the agenda, but may briefly respond to statements or questions by a member of the public. The board president may refer any matter to staff for further follow-up or elect to have the matter placed on an agenda for a future meeting. Seeing none, let's go ahead and do, which one of those 11, 12, and 13 should we do first? 11 is first? Okay. Agenda item 11. Consideration of accepting the final year 2018-19 financial audit and comprehensive annual financial report, CAFR. Not to be confused with PAFR. Okay.
Oh, good. Yes, I'll briefly introduce the item. This is, as you noted, our annual, comprehensive annual financial report. This is the time of year when we pull together things that wrapped up on June 30th, the previous fiscal year. And we have here to present our audit annual for the third year in Paul Pham of Siobhan and Associates. And I'd like to hand it over to him to give you the good news.
There's a hint.
If you're more comfortable to sit, you're welcome to.
Oh, yeah, sure, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so much
everything's-
for inviting me out to share with you the results of the June 30th, 2019 audit. I just want to start out just congratulating Felicia and Melvin. They did a great job, and it's very commendable to have a GFOA certification on the CAFR, so that's, yeah, definitely something to give them credit for. The audit went very well. We had a clean audit, no modification to our opinions, so no corrections noted, no material adjustments that went uncorrected. So I just wanted to touch on just a couple of the key financial highlights from last year. So the district did have a strong positive year with an increase in the net position of almost 4.3 million, which was about 5.8%. So it's going in the positive direction. If you look at the table 1 of the MD&A, you'll see that the current assets, or the cash and investments, decreased quite a bit, and then your capital assets increased. Basically, what you did was spend down your cash and purchased infrastructure and construction projects and whatnot. So that's expected, as you guys know, that the activities happened in the last fiscal year. And on the in terms of your revenues and expenses and the changes in the net position, you'll see that sewer service charges under the operating revenue went up. So the sewer service charge is 6.1% as expected with the scheduled increases in the rates. So you'll see that there. One other thing is in the non-operating revenues, you see that there was a 8.9% increase, which was about $657,000. So that came from increased property taxes that were collected as well as the investment income. Okay, so overall that gave you guys that increase in net position. And that's what I have. So I'll open it up for questions if anybody should have any.
Finance committee, we
I was
went
gonna say,
over it
Tom,
and
do you have any questions?
we thought it was good.
In essence, we took a lot of cash and we can leave it.
And we buried it
Where?
In other words,
in pipes.
all over the district in pipes and
Oh, yeah.
It's a sewer jet.
it's a sewer thing.
Right, well, I think was this our largest expenditure year? Was it this?
30 million in capital.
Probably.
Yeah, it was a big deal.
Yeah.
It was a big year.
Yeah, well, that's the job.
Yeah.
And then part of that was the administration building too.
Right.
Oh, yeah. I have a question.
So we have rules.
Yeah. Go ahead.
What is deferred inflows of resources?
Yeah, so that's kind of a tricky one because you know everyone's used to assets and liabilities, right? And so over time, when people are trying to debate elements of the financial statements, there's certain things, and each element of the financial statement has a very clear and precise definition, right? And so there are a handful of items that don't truly meet the definition of an asset or liability. So they've created this new category of assets and liabilities called deferred inflows of resources and deferred outflows of resources. So you can think of deferred inflow of resources, which is what we're specifically asking about, as liabilities in terms of on the balance sheet where it offsets your assets and affects your bottom line. And these items are actually very specific. So the standard boards have, it's not one of those things where other items can fit that definition. They've already assigned these are the items that are deferred inflows and items that are deferred outflows. So with the new implementation of GASB 68 that recently came out for your pension plans, those would fall into it. With OPEB, which came out last year with GASB 75, same thing. So it's a future recognition that you know, it doesn't really fit the definition of a liability.
Is that why the percentage is so high?
In
Well, why
terms
would
of
the percentage, the change?
the change?
Because this is a new line, or, yeah, it's 314. It's on page 84.
84, okay, yeah.
343.
Okay. Let me see which one that is.
One appears and one appears.
The percentages itself is large, but in terms of dollar amount,
Right,
it's
I saw
very,
that.
It's pretty insignificant to the
So it's like a
district.
catch-all, would you call it?
No, it's not a catch-all. It actually covers just, let me tell you what it makes up. So if you look on page 15, there's two specific items in there. One is related to your other post-employment benefits, the OPEB, so the non-pension portion. And then the other piece is the pension portion. So those two calculations from GASB 75 and 68 makes up that total of 419.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and then if you wanted to see what makes up, there is a note disclosure on, starting on note 10, page 43. As you go through those note 10 and 11, it does detail the specific items. And so when you have your pension plan and your OPA plan, there's actuarials that are done, and so that explains the deferrals related to that.
Okay.
It's on page 119.
Yeah.
Do the handle.
So we have a clean audit. We're receiving the audit. We don't approve it or
You accept it?
we accept.
Yeah, I was talking to Felicia today, and I kept looking to find some
Yeah.
corrections or deficits, or where's our dings, you know, where's that page? I was like, where's the summary? And so I'm very happily surprised. This looks really good. Thank you.
This is, we've been working really hard for at least 6 years that I'm aware of. We're good for this comment.
All right, do you, any public comment? or do you want-
Public comment? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
I move to accept the report.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay,
Have a good night.
let's set up a table for arm wrestling for 12 and 13.
We do 12.
12.
Let me just.
Our fearless leader says 12. Consideration of adopting resolutions number 19-1572, authorizing the general manager to file applications with the State Water Resources Control Board. Resolution 19-1573, stating intent to reimburse the State Water Resources Control Board. And resolution 19-1574, pledging revenues and funds for gravity sewer improvements, Butterfield Arroyo Kenrick project. And this is all in order that we can apply for and hopefully receive state revolving funds at a very, very low percentage rate, which will be extremely advantageous to the district.
Yes, well stated, President Borstein. This, when we went through the sewer rate study in April and went over a long-term capital program that we were trying to fund the sewer surcharge plus Avalon, but mostly for the capital. And going through those analyses, you might recall, we projected the potential capital program and coming up with different ways to pay for it and keep rates as low as possible. We wanted to have a blend of revenue bonds and SRF funding because of the low interest rates that we pointed out. And we have a specific project that we're recommending to apply for this funding that is queued up. But it turns out it's a third of a larger project that has been broken up, really because there's a window to construct these improvements of the trunk line in a very narrow, traffic-challenged area near schools. And so to get the sewer project effectively built, we need to do it over 3 different summer periods between when school is in or out. And that was one of the factors that went into it. Others were overall cost. So we've done 2 of the 3 legs. We were just wrapping up the second leg this last summer. And you'll be seeing those in completion. So the last leg, not as urgent from a system functioning standpoint, but still needed to complete the overall work, would have to be either next summer or the summer after that. In talking with the town of San Anselmo, they requested that we not construct this project in the summer 2020, but rather in 2021. That fits pretty well with the timetable, and I'm going to hand it over to George Hicks here of Coastline Engineering to explain the process a little more. But there's a timetable for us to obtain the funding, qualify, get everything lined up, then go out to bid and construct the project and get reimbursed for those construction costs. And so it turns out that it works pretty well for both the town's interests and our interest in funding with these low interest loans to postpone until 2021 to do the work. And so this all seems to be coming together. I want to thank Felicia as well for really being the point person for the district and working with George in setting this up as a financial program. And I do have some experience working in it both at the state board level, but also applying when I worked at New Engineering. So this is the same process in terms of the type of commitments. But I will say some innovations have happened where the recognition that there's not a subordination necessarily of other debt to this proposed debt to the state. They've come along to have more favorable terms, and I think that's part of the story why there's so much demand for the program. Because when I was applying back 10 years ago, it was undersubscribed, but certain things have come together to make it very attractive. And so we will be competing for this funding, and George has helped us put together a package to make us more competitive. And it's an annual process now instead of a rolling process. So we have to do this before the end of the calendar year. And so we're in time to be able to qualify for the next annual round. And with that introduction, I'd like to hand over to George Hicks of Coastline Engineering to fill in any gaps or explain a little bit of the process. that we-
Before you do that, I have a quick question, and that is, state revolving funds don't, we don't accrue interest until we start the project or start using the money, is that correct? So it's not like a bond where you take out the bond and you're immediately accruing debt,
It's like a takeout loan.
Yeah.
right? So if we were applying for this, are we applying for this in 2020 or in 2021?
The application, the process up until 2 years ago was a rolling, ongoing process. You applied at any given time, and you went through the process. You were notified if you were approved, you got a funding agreement, you could proceed with your project. 2 years ago, the state changed the program. Now they do it because it's oversubscribed, as Steve mentioned, and they do it in annual batches. So the deadline is December 31st. The way that the timing would work is, if you have a completed application, and we plan to do that by December 31st, it gets acted on. In terms of the timing, the earliest the board will start to approve and issue funding agreements would be June. The latest would be late fall or early winter. To get to your question, once you get notified that you're qualified and you have a funding agreement, you don't get charged interest until after the project is complete. And our project would go, as Steve mentioned, probably the following year into 2021. So we would know well in advance before we even bid the project that you had the funding, and then you would be able to build the project in 2021, and interest would be applied at the conclusion of the project.
That's great. Now, so if we're doing that, are we paying the vendor the whole way until they reimburse us at the end? How does that work?
You make disbursement requests as the project goes along, progress payments, so to speak. This project will be relatively quick, I think 3 to 4 months, because the district has committed to completing it during the summer recess, so.
See, I thought you said when the project's complete, so they can do
We start
disbursements.
paying not until the project's complete. And we only, if we have $4 million and we've taken $1 million out, interest accrues on that $1 million, but we don't pay anything.
It's fantastic.
Only on the.
No, we spoke about state revolving funds for a long time now, so I'm a big fan of it, so, you know.
It's below the earnings rate of our money. Not the cost of our money, but
And even taking this, once again, I think is another avenue, if granted, to increase our credit rating once again, because now we have lower interest rates than we would if we took out a bond measure. So it's even another attractive
and we had
point to
actually
make to the credit
budgeted,
agencies.
we had budgeted getting $4 million or so in our capital projections. So that's consistent with this. Now there's two alternative ways to go here. Will you explain that to us?
Sure. They're very unusual. Conventional financing is something you can pretty much take at face value. It is what it is. The interest rate that the program charges you if you go conventional financing is half the GO bond rate that's in place at the time your funding agreement is issued. So the long-term average for that over the past 10 years has been about 1.9%. To be conservative, the staff at the state board recommends you use 2% for comparing the alternatives, which is what is in your staff report. But that's something you're used to. The other option is a little unusual and kind of maybe hard to like at first, but I think it's the one that we've asked you to consider tonight, and that is the match financing program. Under the match financing program, really what you're effectively doing is you are getting 83% of your project cost, you are matching 17%. So there's a little contribution by the agency, and what that contribution basically does is buys down the interest rate to 0. So the match financing has 0% financing. If your project cost is laid out here, ours is almost $5.5 million. You look at the second page of the staff report. The loan amount you would get is $4.562 million, or 83% of that amount. You would have to match the rest, but you end up having to pay back the $5.5 million. So it's a quasi-interest. If you pay an interest, you're paying a lot of money too. And the box attempts to compare the two alternatives. If you go with conventional financing at the 2% rate, the board recommends you use for comparison purposes. Your total payments versus loan amounts on a 30-year loan are 134%. On a 20-year loan, they're 122%. If you look at the match financing, they're 120% is kind of a flat amount. So under that comparison, regardless of the term you would use for conventional financing, the match financing program works out. If you're interested in knowing kind of what the break-even points are, the interest rates would have to be 1.8% on a 20-year issuance for the conventional match financing programs to be comparable. Then it'd have to go down to 1.2% over a 20-year issuance in order for the conventional financing to be equivalent to the match.
As I understand it.
But as was mentioned, the big thing here and the reason we asked you to consider that is, in talking to the board staff, we submitted a preliminary application, had it rated. It's very prescriptive, and basically there's 16 points possible. The project gets 12 points. Last year the cutoff for funding was 13. It's not to say it is this year, but that's at least the prediction of most people. If you go match financing, you get a 2-point bump, so it would give you 14 points, and that seems to put you clearly in the fundable category, whereas conventional financing, I think you run a big risk of not being above the cutoff.
And then we get no dollars.
Again, the match funding is better for the ratepayer in the long run. We're not going anywhere.
Well, it's a no-brainer, and Tom is always concerned that we go longer than 20 or 25 years, but it's the same, exact
We
amount
can go
if we go
25.
30 years. So,
Oh, yeah. I always hate going 30 years, because you just end up paying for 5 more years and 5 more years of interest.
Right.
But here, you don't. You pay the exact same amount, and you get to spend over 30 years. So 30 years it is, and that's the longest it can go.
Exactly.
And spread out to lower payments, so it's a less debt service year after year.
so basically, what we're doing tonight is we're saying, in order to do the SRF loan, we just have to say, yeah, let's go for it. And that's what we're doing tonight, is this is a procedural vote to see if we can get this SRF.
And we gotta make a pledge of revenues. And that's what we did on our revenue bond, to make a guarantee, and they're requiring a pledge of revenues.
Right. Are we deciding tonight if, I think we're all okay with the match financing. Are we deciding tonight a 30-year or 20-year repayment or not?
Or do they care?
We need to stipulate that in the application.
30 year.
30 year. And match financing.
Why 30-year? Because 20 years is $90,000 a year less. I mean, annual payment of $273 versus, well, I'm sorry. It's the exact, yeah, it's back, it's the exact same. So it's, you're right. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There's no more interest.
Yep.
There's no reason to pay it back fast.
Yep. I apologize. Absolutely right.
Under the program, if you ever wanted to accelerate your payments, you could with no plan.
You can't.
Yeah, one of the things conceptually I think of in terms of paying it sooner, if you had a infrastructure that had a 10-year life cycle, or 15, then you might want to pay it now, so you got to pay for the next life cycle. In this case, the pipeline is 75, 100-year asset. So whether you pay it back in 20 or 30 years is not too much of a pressure point.
So any more board questions? Putting it out to the public,
So,
do we have a motion?
well, it just says considers.
No,
Okay,
we're
staff.
passing all the resolutions we need
We
to
have to pass all the resolutions.
to apply, to say we're gonna repay it, and then to say we'll
Exactly.
dedicate ad valorem. So there's 3 resolutions.
Exactly. Which requires a roll call.
Not really.
No?
I
Okay.
recommend that we pass those 3 resolutions. Do I have to go
You have
for
to move.
You move.
I move that we
Okay.
pass the resolutions to help us qualify for this.
Do I hear a
I'll
second?
second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank
Mr.
you.
13.
Thank you.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, George.
We'll explain.
Deliver signed documents to you tomorrow.
Consideration of accepting infrastructure asset management plan. Item. Phase 1, status update and authorizing the general manager on review and approval of legal counsel to execute task orders 6 through 9 with HDR Engineering Inc. in the total of $575,845 for Phase 2 of the IAM Update and Program Support Services.
All right. Brief introduction, because I want our guest Alan Scott of HDR to give you an update on where the IAMP is and what we're proposing. The package that I've assembled for you includes this PowerPoint presentation so you can follow along and can give us the talk. But I also have included, after the PowerPoint presentation, is a letter that we obtained from the Regional Water Board a couple weeks ago, or last week. And it was in response to the letter that we put together, Felicia signed in July, and that Catherine had helped with. But also we have here Patrick Filippelli, he's our business systems analyst and data guru. Puts us in, in the upper echelon of data managers, water, wastewater utilities around the state. And so in assembling that report, we had to respond to cease and desist orders requirements that if we didn't get all of the projects that were in the cease and desist order or the current IAMP done, we had to explain, okay, well, what are you going to do and how long is it going to take to come into compliance and get those projects done? So we proposed to the regional board that we update the IAMP and have it make data-driven recommendations, risk-based recommendations for the best, most cost-effective investments for the district, and have that inform a capital improvement program. And upon completion of this IAMP, which would be at the end of next year, 2020. And so we proposed a date of March 2021 to have an alternative compliance plan based on an updated IAMP. This letter shows that they accepted that proposal. And so we're about, I don't know, I want to say a third through the IAMP process roughly, and Alan can give us an update. And then at the conclusion of that process, we'll have a new program. But this one will be a little more flexible, recognizing that we have an active condition assessment program with John Vogel, who's here, helps lead up under Stephen Mix's guidance, that can have a more living, changeable, flexible capital program than was the rigid 5-year program of the previous IAMP. So to do that, we really need to bring in some assistance and expertise based on statewide experience to help guide us to use these tools that Patrick's very familiar with in terms of our info asset program. Alan's familiar with using those tools to be able to inform CIP and get us to that finish line, which I will submit is our exit strategy for the cease and desist order. But it is still a couple of years out. And that's my introduction, and with that I'd like to hand it over to Alan Scott, who's been leading as a project manager for the team from HDR and West Yost that's helping us update the IMP. Alan?
Well, thank you, Steve, and good evening, board members. I'm glad to see you again. I think the last time I was here was back in March when you gave us approval for the first phase of the work. And what we'll do tonight is I'll go through and bring you up to date on the work that we've done on the first phase, and then introduce you to the second phase, which we're asking for approval for tonight as well, and then talk about how it all fits together under the context of what Steve just explained. So first I want to talk a little bit, set the context of how we got here. We'll go over stuff that I'm sure you're all familiar with, but it will help, to set the context and the overall goal and direction of our IAMP update. So initially, this process got started with a cease and desist order that was issued in 2013, and it required several prescriptive actions that the district had to take in order to improve the sewer infrastructure, improve operations, and mitigate SSOs. And these prescriptive actions were based on whatever limited data was available at the time, and it was largely based on the 2007 sewer system replacement master plan. In order to address these requirements, you did the original infrastructure asset management plan also in 2013, which was basically the plan to address the requirements of the CDO. And part of that was also to continue to collect data, to understand the system better, to really assess the condition, and to really put together some more vigorous cleaning and O&M programs. And so as you were doing that, and meeting the other prescriptive requirements, you were finding that there's other things that are important to be addressing that weren't in those prescriptive requirements. So required spending time convincing the board that we have to do these other things in lieu of the original requirements in the CDO. So, and that was successful, and that's worked very well. Also, going through the process of reporting on the projects and the efforts, looking back over the year, that's been able to convince regulators and everyone else, the stakeholders, that the process has been working, even though some of the original requirements weren't directly addressed. And you can see here, this is data on your spill history. The years go across the bottom, and the number of spills are on the vertical axis, and you can see they trended down over time, and that's been very good. So obviously the process has been working. And then in addition, in 2018, the NPDES permit came out for the CMSA treatment plant and requires you to reduce the amount of I&I, inflow and infiltration, into the system to avoid them having to blend water down at the plant. And this is another set of prescriptive requirements. So as you're finding out more about the system, as you're getting a better understanding of what the priorities are, and those priorities changing over time, spending a lot of time explaining why you want to do things differently than what you had agreed to earlier. So in order to address all this and to set the program on a course that can be more transparent, data-driven, and versatile and flexible in terms of dealing with the most critical and current issues as they come up, we've got the IAMP update, which we're talking about tonight. And this overall goal is to take a comprehensive look at the infrastructure, do assessments of all the key infrastructure categories, and understand where the risks are, what type of improvements need to be made, and put together a program that you can run yourselves at the end of the IAMP, that you can continue to go through a transparent, data-driven process to make the best decisions and continue to mitigate that risk, meet the CDO requirements, and reduce your I&I and achieve all those objectives at the same time. So our key strategies here are looking forward to being a more transparent, more agile decision-making process, and moving out of the prescriptive toward a targeted, data-driven process.
But those reports now are required, aren't they?
I'm sorry?
The annual reports are required now based on...
Yeah, and we're not proposing to get rid of those at all. It's just that they're not useful tools for strategic decision-making and looking forward. Right. So out of the updated IAMP, you should have a path forward out of the prescriptive CDO requirements. It will be a technical process, data-driven, data collected from the field. It will be a transparent process, and it would allow you to move from a reactive process to a more programmatic and more proactive process. So by doing this, you should continue to gain confidence of the regional board and other stakeholders that you have your program in hand, you're making good decisions, you're collecting the right data, and you're continuing to reduce the SSOs and comply with all the regulations that you've got. The IAMP update has got 2 phases. Phase 1 is in progress and consists of the sewer main rehabilitation study, hydraulic model update, and force main condition assessment. And then phase 2 is going to look at the creek crossings, assessing those for risk, manhole risk assessment, and an I&I reduction plan, and a capital improvement plan integration process. Each of these categories or these tasks in phase 1 and phase 2 are going to end up with their own siloed set of recommendations, and that CIP integration is going to give you a framework to bring that all together to provide a more robust capital planning process. So, at the end of this, you'll be able to implement this yourself without having to bring additional consultants in, or maybe just strategically bring consultants in. And as Steve said, March 2021 is when we'll be finished and submit our final results to the board. So let's look at the current projects. The current project status, phase 1. We have 5 tasks in phase 1. Task 1 is project management. I didn't put it up here, but it's the ongoing process of managing the project. Task 2 is a data review. Task 3 is a hydraulic evaluation update, updating the hydraulic model. It also has a flow monitoring element, which we are going to start next month, putting flow monitors in the system during the wet weather season to baseline flows and see what's happening, both to gauge improvement of the capital efforts that you've put in place already, and to set the baseline for the I&I study in phase 2. Task 4, pipe structural reinspection and repair plan, is looking at a defect analysis in the pipes, how the defects degrade over time, and that tells us more technically the timing and the priorities of repairing those defects as opposed to the prescriptive requirements in the CEO. Yes?
In the flow monitoring report, how is that different than what we're getting with smart covers currently, which we've had for 6 years?
So the smart covers, they have a different level of accuracy, relative accuracy. The flow monitoring is also going to be more strategically placed in the system, and we're going to use that in conjunction with the smart cover data to look at, some, and hopefully in many cases, sub-basin areas, and look at where the capital improvement projects have done the best. So they're going to be used in conjunction, and then once we have the flow monitoring data, will be more accurate, more precise, but it will also give you insight as to how you can apply the smart cover data to do more flow monitoring in the future.
What kind of technology do you use for flow monitoring?
We're going to rent some flow monitors
Okay.
and put them in the...
Okay.
How many, okay, so I was curious about that. How many flow monitors are you anticipating utilizing?
We're proposing 4 monitors, and then we're moving around some of the smart covers to augment that.
How many smart cars we have again? 36, is it?
35.
35.
Yeah.
Okay. So are you moving them from each other? Are you using them together?
We bought
Yeah.
35.
We're going to be using them together.
And I'm sorry, if I can interrupt 1 second. Didn't we talk briefly about a less expensive smart cover option from the very same smart cover vehicle? It's sort of like the smart cover light.
I'm not sure what.
Would you look into that? And because I think I spoke to him about that last year at the conference.
They have different kind of sensors, but they're still developing and implementing a lot of John's ideas actually into the new technology. But we have a dual sensor, so when the sensor actually gets buried because of the surcharge, we can still tell how high it is. Yes, submerged.
It's submerged, yeah. Okay, sorry.
Is it just a smart?
We'll call it the John,
It's
John
Smart.
Smart cover.
You can buy more.
Smart John cover.
We'll continue, we'll have a discussion, because I don't know that they're getting less expensive per se. So we'll talk. But one thing here, just since we're taking a pause, I would also note that the flow monitoring locations are places where flow monitoring was conducted in the previous study. So that there'll be a trend analysis we'll be able to do, compare back then, what year, 2008. Think of all of the work that's been done since 2008 and what kind of difference in flows that we may be able to see. And this flow monitoring has to be done during storms, so it's not inexpensive to do, although, there'll be some automation, right?
Right.
But, we have to make sure we capture data during storms and then have it compared to those same spots, but
Yeah.
10, 12 years early.
It's gonna help improve the accuracy of the hydraulic model as well because of that.
And we didn't mention that the hydraulic model was also updated. We were very careful to make sure we put all of the currently all of the capital improvements that have been completed are in the model. There can be a lag between, record drawings and putting it in our info asset system. It could be a year, but we made sure that didn't happen so that we're really modeling the current system that has been renovated.
Correct.
Thank you.
And then the final task in phase one is force main condition assessment, where we're doing a risk analysis on the force mains. We're looking at technology to do an assessment of the condition. We're going to be focusing on the higher risk force mains. And we're just getting started with that as well. And here's the schedule. You see 2019 and 2020. We should be finished with all of this work in the spring of 2020. The data review, you've collected a tremendous amount of data since 2013, and we've been able to assimilate that and use it for the other tasks as we've been going along. The hydraulic model update is it's pretty far along, and we're just getting into the flow monitoring phase of that, so we can start putting that data into the model as well. The pipe structural inspection, reinspection and repair plan is actually almost finished. We'll be providing a report next month for review, basically the findings and the guidelines for changing the reinspection and the rehabilitation based on the defect types. And I'll talk more about both of those things in just a minute here. And then the force main condition assessment is getting started as well. We have a budget reserve for the technologies, so that's going to be spent rapidly. It's sort of like a bell curve, the spending on that, because once we pick the technologies, we'll be getting out in the field and doing those assessments over a short period of time. So, in a little bit more detail, the hydraulic evaluation update, as Steve mentioned, we were able to put all of the capital project improvements up through 2014 into the system. We've recalibrated the model and we've done the hydraulic evaluation, and now we've targeted the flow monitoring locations. We're going to be putting those out next month to start collecting that data and to validate the model as well. We're about a little bit less than halfway through the project here. We've got 41% spent. The earned value is basically what are we getting for that amount of money. We're a little bit ahead of the game. If you've got a higher percentage of earned value over your percent spent, you're getting more accomplished for the money than originally anticipated. So, and some of the key things that we are finding is that with the capital work that you've done, as you mentioned before, you're taking this money and burying it. It's paying off. Flows are decreasing in the model results now, both in wet weather and dry weather. That indicates that the rehab efforts are being effective at preventing I&I. And then now we're going to be looking more closely at those individual improvements to see which ones are giving you the best bang for the buck, the most improvements. So.
I'm very happy.
Yeah, that's good. That's totally good.
The pipe structural reinspection and repair plan. We've done the deterioration analysis. I'll explain how that works in just a minute and what we're finding. And we're putting together the repair plan, which is going to give you guidance on how to do the analysis in the future. Recommendations for repair and reinspection, which are somewhat different than what's prescribed in the cease and desist order. And we're about, like I said, we'll be giving you the report next month for review. So we're doing very well with that. This is an interesting process because you've been able to collect a lot of CCTV data over the years, and we can go and look at individual defects now through those the library of CCTV data and see how quickly things are deteriorating. So here you have they're both the same section of pipe, and in 2008 you can see you've got these cracks occurring in the pipe, And one of the ways to describe this is in clock position. So maybe this is like 8 o'clock and this is like at 12 o'clock. So you've got this whole section here impacted, but you can see in 2017, when we ran the camera through again, you can see it's a much more significantly deteriorated defect, right? So what we're able to do is look at over 200 of these, grade 4s and grade 5s, which are the ones that you have compliance requirements around in the CDO. And we found some interesting things. For one, very few of these defects are deteriorating, less than 5%, which is pretty interesting, over the 3 to 9 year period that we looked at the CCTV data. And in particular, the small grade 5 defects are not deteriorating, and that's where the clock position comes in. So anything less than a 2 clock position, so anything less than between 10 and 12, you know, for example, on a clock, you're not seeing much deterioration in those defects. The large defects are the ones that are deteriorating, and you can see that evidence here on this screen. So what that's telling us is that we can have a longer frequency between re-inspections on some of these defects if we know that they're not deteriorating. And then we also know which ones to really focus on to mitigate further destruction of the infrastructure as it gets older. So I think those are really key and will play into the future plan for rehab and inspection.
Yeah, that's right. I'll translate that to staff efforts. If our re-inspection based on this evidence for deterioration, if our recommended re-inspection is at a more relaxed pace, that has implications for our day-to-day work in terms of what we've spent our staff time doing. Same with the repairs. You know, how urgent are these repairs? The cease and desist order is structured in certain assumptions that are, what we're learning through this detailed process, are quite aggressive and overly conservative. And so this will allow us to, you know, a mixture of our staff efforts, but also the capital improvement program. You know, how urgent are these pipe defects to the capital solution versus the in-house repair solution? And now we have it based on actual deterioration analysis that justifies, re-inspection and repair at not as aggressive a pace.
And what that means is that you can spend more time on focusing on other critical things that are not on this particular list. So the force main condition assessment, as I mentioned, we're in the early stages of that. We've done a data review of all the force mains. We've developed an initial prioritization that we're about to review with the district staff to rank the pipes in terms of risk. And we've gone through some technology workshops to look at the different technologies that could be used to inspect the force mains, because it's going to be different. You can't just run a CCTV camera through there and get the same kind of results as you do from a gravity meter. So we're early in the process, 12% spent, about 14% complete. And we're going to be working on that in the coming months. So here's what the preliminary risk assessment looks like. Each of these dots is a different force main in your system, and it's plotted on these axes. The vertical axis is the likelihood of failure, which means how likely is it to fail? What condition is it in based on the data and information we've been able to review? So anything on the lower part of this axis is in pretty good shape. Anything on the upper part is in relatively worse shape. And then on the bottom part is the consequence of failure, which is if it does fail, what happens? Do you make the newspaper or the nightly news, or is it something that...
Or national news.
Or national news. or do the O&M guys fix it in a couple of days and it's really relatively minor. So toward this side is the relatively minor, and toward the other side is the national news. So you can see anything in the upper right-hand corner is going to be a high-risk force main. Anything down toward the lower left is going to be relatively low risk. So what we're going to be doing is focusing on the high-risk pipes and trying to get those done first with the budget we have for condition assessment.
Are these our actual force mains, or you haven't done the study yet?
we're in the process of doing it. This is your data. This is preliminary results. Yeah.
What are the
It looks like there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
Why are some of them like yellow and green?
We just did that because it's very difficult to see with that graded background.
Okay, so that means
Yeah, that's not anything indicative of.
So that means more problematic and the green
Yeah.
means less problematic.
Yeah.
So that looks
in
like
general.
almost 50% on the bad
So,
zone.
so also keep in mind, it's a relative risk. These axes actually go from 0 to 10 on both sides. So it's not that, that the ones on the left are in danger of failing tomorrow. It's just that relatively, compared to the rest of the system, they're the worst. They're the ones we want to focus on and find out more information to figure out if something has to be done immediately.
The board might remember there was a cooperative project with CNSA to use a condition assessment tool and help me out with the year it was.
2017?
So not that long ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2016.
With Pure Technologies.
And, the Pure Technology Smart Ball that rolled down from our Kentfield pump station all the way to the CNSA headworks, right? And so there was good news about that. There were very small anomalies that were explained. And so there was good news that that major trunk line,
It made it.
force main
That was the best news.
was in reasonable shape. And then again, just the caveat here is we're early in the process. This is just a snapshot of the type of screening we're doing and to help prioritize where to do the condition assessment because it's very expensive per pipe length to do the specialized condition assessment for force mains compared to our everyday gravity sewer work. It's a different animal. So we want to be very targeted. And this is a screening that we're doing to justify that.
And so it could turn out that even though they're on the other side of that, the upper left-hand side, it may be that they're in relatively good shape and nothing has to be done for 5 to 10 years. That's definitely a possible outcome. This is just a way to figure out how do we target the condition assessment dollars. So the remaining work on phase 1, we're, as I mentioned before, for the hydraulic evaluation, we're starting the flow monitoring study, and we're going to be quantifying the rehabilitation impacts that have already occurred on the flow in the system to begin to address the I&I issue and understand what types of capital improvements give you the best bang for the buck in terms of reducing I&I. On the pipe structural repair and reinspection, we're finalizing the guidelines on how to do these assessments in the future and the final costs, which we're using to make recommendations on capital planning for the next 5 years. And then we'll be completing the actual plan all next month, so you can start reviewing that. And force mains, we're going to be continuing to rank the force mains on that risk, using that risk methodology, pair them up with the condition assessment technology that gives us the best information, because each of the different types of materials might have a different technology that's ideal for that. And then we'll go through the assessment process and develop our findings and recommendations from that. So that's the work that we've done and that we're doing now. We'll be finishing with most of that in the spring. And now let's talk about phase 2, which is what we're asking for permission to move forward with tonight. Phase 2 has 4 tasks besides ongoing project management. Task 6 is the infiltration and inflow reduction plan. Task 7 is a creek crossing risk assessment. Task 8 is manhole risk assessment and recommendations for repairs and rehab. And task 9 is capital planning integration. And I'll talk more about those in the coming slides here. So the I&I reduction plan report, basically the goal here is to address the I&I requirements that you're getting from your NPDES permit. This is going to be 5 or so major steps, looking at the effectiveness of the completed I&I activities through the capital work that you've done so far, leveraging the hydraulic model and other information that we're finding on the other tasks, establishing I&I targets that you can achieve in the future, and then identifying and validating activities that would help you achieve those targets, and you doing a couple pilot projects to validate that those activities will in fact be effective. And then from there, we can give you both a 5-year and a 10-year look ahead at I&I recommendations. So that's the bulk of the I&I reporting.
Can I ask you a quick question on the INI?
Absolutely.
What's your best guess as to how much we could lower our INI over the next 10 years? What percentage?
I'm afraid I don't have an answer for you right now. We're just starting to discuss that, and anything I would tell you would just be,
Okay.
But
But you'll get them?
we will get there, yeah. And we're going to be able to establish that from the activities that you've done, the updated hydraulic model, looking at the effectiveness of the reduced flows. So,
You've done a program like this before, somewhere, didn't you? IAMP program. Did you?
Yeah, I think this works similar to this for Santa Barbara.
Okay. And do they have an INI reduction plan?
They do not.
Oh, they don't have INI.
Well, everybody does.
They have I&I, but it's not,
Whoa.
it doesn't affect, it doesn't appreciably affect their treatment process. So, but they do have it, they just are not under any requirements to address it right now. So, at least, it's been a couple of years since I've been over there, but, the latest I've known is that they have not had to address that there. So,
Right. Yeah.
okay. So task 7 is the creek crossing assessment. This is a risk assessment of all the pipes that either cross creeks or go parallel to the creeks in the channels, which would be risk of damage from excessive flow or flooding. This picture is not a Ross Valley picture. It's actually Sacramento County, and they're not eating lunch. They're actually doing an assessment.
Picture of doing
We
science.
know what our crossings look like. It doesn't look
Yes. So the creek crossing assessment is the one task where we're actually going to be going out in the field and doing some visual inspection and data collection of information that we need to assess the creek crossings. This is another one where we're going to be doing a risk model and a decision support model for rehabilitation or repair recommendations using Info Asset Planner, which is it's a technical model that sits on top of the GIS system that is used for doing these types of risk assessments. It has built-in risk modeling capabilities and decision support processes that allow you to pick the right remediation or remedy for the given conditions for every pipe. So we'll be going through and developing the risk model, leveraging the data from the pipe deterioration study. We'll be going out in the field and collecting data on the critical crossings and also ones that we just know that there's very limited or no information on. And then we'll be putting that all into a risk model for prioritizing which ones should be addressed and a decision logic model to determine what's the best remedy for each of those pipes. And we'll end up with findings and recommendations in our report. And task 8 is the manhole assessment, and this is another risk assessment, but this is a desktop study because you've got a large amount of data that we can look at already. As part of the regular O&M operations, there's manhole assessments going on all the time. We're going to leverage that data. We'll leverage the information from the pipeline reinspection and rehabilitation task. And if we have if it's timely, we'll leverage I&I study information as well. We'll develop the risk model and the decision logic for rehabilitation recommendations, very similar to creek crossing, and then we'll give you a rehab plan for that.
Will this report tell us how many of our manholes are sealed and how many are not?
They're not gonna pressure test every manhole. but it'll give us a good indication of I by seeing the staining.
Didn't the district specifically go out and seal certain manholes?
Oh, yeah.
It'd be nice to know what percentage of our manholes are sealed without a pressure test.
Yeah.
I mean, the ones on downtown San Anselmo, which overflowed a couple of years back, are now sealed.
Yes.
And so I'd like to know how many of our manholes are sealed and how many are not.
Okay.
The field work we're doing is not a full-blown condition assessment on each of the manholes,
Gotcha.
but
But that
we
data
can
is probably
factor
available.
that into, and figure out how we can address that question.
Yeah, it's a reasonable question.
Yeah.
The asset management system has all the data
Mhm.
in it. So what we can do, and, Patrick, could, this is the kind of question I ask him all the time.
Patrick will tell us, that's.
So you have to query the database.
Yeah.
And so, we have that sort of, the date the work was done is in, and it's assigned to each asset geospatially.
I just, you're doing the study, you know what you're doing more than I, but it seems to me that if we had all of our manholes sealed, we'd have less SSOs. Or it would start at this, it wouldn't get in the pipe in the first place, back somewhere, we'd have a backup somewhere, but, I'd rather not come up in front of, the new restaurant on, downtown Larkspur. So it just seems to me that that's, again, you guys know that business better than I do, but I like the idea of sealed manholes.
We also have the I study, which will be looking at what types of capital improvements and activities will reduce the I most effectively, and also targeting which of the areas. So maybe you don't have to seal all 6,000 manholes, but we can figure out which ones that's going to be most
Exactly.
effective.
Patrick?
Yeah, and using existing data that we have from doing assessments, we can tell you which manholes are more susceptible to the infiltration. So, we can say in specific areas that these ones have more staining and more leakage, whereas in other areas they do not. So we can do a targeted program to say, hey, these are more important.
Thank you.
So we do have some information on that.
Good question. So the last task here is the capital planning integration, which was not part of the original set of tasks in the original RFP that was developed by the district. But this is a method that's going to allow you to take all the information from each of these other studies. Each one is going to end up with recommendations, what I call siloed recommendations, and allow you to integrate them into a more comprehensive capital plan. And then it also will provide a long-range forecast or capital analysis of the next coming couple of decades as to when you should expect to have increased in rehabilitation and replacement needs. So the way this works is, these are the tasks that are in phase 1 and phase 2. The blue ones are the phase 1 tasks. The green ones are the phase 2. There's an orange task up here, which is a lift station condition assessment, which is not part of the IAMP, but the district is doing it themselves with another engineering firm. But each of these tasks is going to end up with a set of a risk analysis and a set of recommendations. And what the challenges that I noticed in this process was that how do you reconcile the high priority recommendations and the pipe structural analysis with the crew crossing assessment and the I work that needs to happen. So what we're doing under this task is developing an overall risk framework. And I've already talked to the task leaders about when they do their risk analysis that we have this target already established so that they don't have to all do the risk the same way, but we want it apples to apples to come into this primary risk framework. So this risk framework will allow us to combine all the results here and develop a set of integrated recommendations that can, take advantage of, if there's real high priority pipes that need to be replaced, how does that affect I&I, and how does that affect the findings of the manholes? You start leveraging and taking advantage of multiple different types of assets that need to be rehabbed. And then developing that prioritized CIP, and then also O&M actions, because there may be some activities that can be put off if O&M was addressed a little bit differently. It'll keep the asset going a little bit further until we can get to it as a higher priority. So that's the main essence of the capital planning integration.
And we, in our report to the water board, and even in the metrics report that you saw last month, we put the capital mileage and budget alongside the in-house repair budget and mileage. And so that's replicated there below, the idea that we can still prioritize some things cost effectively to be doing in-house
Right.
for certain assets, and then other assets require, more sophisticated contractor equipment to do.
So the final piece of this is the long-term expenditure forecast. And I think we talked a little bit about this the last time I was here. And this is the idea of actually looking at anticipated expenditures, capital expenditures over the next several decades. And so here you have, this is not your data, by the way, so don't get excited about the peaks and the valleys. But this is, these are the years moving out to 2045, and then these are the anticipated expenditures. This is based on the inventory of assets, their expected useful life, and their estimated replacement costs. It's very high-level planning, but it's like, the dials on your dashboard of your car, it'll tell you, when you need to start anticipating higher expenditures. So what you do with this is you can combine this with the short-term assessments that we're doing in the other tasks, which give you a much more detailed look at the 5 to 10 year window, and then you can understand exactly what has to happen in the short term, and then get an understanding of what may be coming up over the horizon for that. So here's the schedule we have proposed for this. Basically, most of the assessment work will be done by the middle of the summer, and then we'll be developing the primary IAMP update report in the fall, and then the capital integration is going to be, in the winter and the spring of 2021. So, all to be delivered by the March 21st deadline, 2021 deadline. So this approach, hopefully you can see how this approach takes you from the current prescriptive process where you're getting this data, you're understanding what your needs are, but it's a one-off negotiation every time you need to make changes based on what's expected. This will give you a more agile, data-driven, transparent, repeatable process that you can use for capital planning. It'll help you to react as you get more understanding about the system as your data enriches, and it will take you from a reactive program to a more programmatic approach. And this is something I think, Steve, you said you've already been discussing with the regulators as well, right? So.
Right. But also, on this slide, you have the pay-go approach, and that really, we're looking at that closely. The sewer rate analysis study, to make all the numbers add up, we came up with a recommendation 5 years from now will be, an asymptote, sort of, we were kind of flattening out around $10 million a year.
Well, there's nothing set in stone that has to be the number for this agency,
We want to use the actual data and prioritization scheme and the risk-based analysis to generate the capital program and ultimately be in a pay-go approach. We estimated the current rate structure and everything, that $10 million a year, several years out, might be a pay-go number. And we would target that, but I want to assure the board that's, we're not wedded to that number. We want to do this type of analysis to have a grassroots, bottom-up, condition assessment-based, risk-based program, and then, cost that out. But ultimately, listening to your guidance, we want to move us out of going into debt and catching up on infrastructure work to get to a pay-go approach. And we think this can justify those type of changes. You noted, just in passing, but we looked at the lift station condition assessment aspect of the proposal from the last RFC. Since we've done major pump station upgrades in the last year, and we have not much to go with the Larkspur pump station, really the scope on this is limited to small lift stations, and we think we have a more cost-effective route, working with Noel Sandoval, our pump station supervisor, and his knowledge, and going through those systematically. But we understand the need to benchmark that part of our infrastructure too, and do something in parallel, working a little more locally, internally, and then in the capital integration plan, that information will be developed in a way that's consistent with what the team is putting together so that it can be integrated in. Because we do have that in our current long-term capital, is to revisit those small lift stations at a certain point a couple of years out. We want to now nest that within this more sophisticated asset management-based capital program. So we're not forgetting that, but we're recommending an alternative way to get there.
And that's it.
That's our story.
Any questions? But it did get us, by doing that, that was a cost savings, that was a cost savings approach to be more efficient. I'm guessing that by doing that, we definitely meet the original target that we reported to you in March this year in terms of meeting that overall budget expectation. So that was one modification we made.
Great. Great. I love the idea that we're looking at fives and seeing maybe one five isn't like another five, right?
Very much not the same.
And is that, so if it's like at what was that, 8 and 12, are all 8 and 12s going to disintegrate at the same rate? Do you know what I'm
It
asking?
depends, there's very different types of defects and the different type materials, and there's
Soil
different
conditions
soils
and,
and
yeah.
diameter, it will have an influence on wall thickness, so it's hard to make a gross generalization like that, but we're finding some trends in the data, and we know which types of defects to look at and which ones we're seeing the most degradation on, which is really pretty cool.
Yeah, that is amazing.
Yeah.
We do it very specific to this district or to certain locations of the pipe, I imagine, based on.
I think we'll get there. Right now, we're looking mostly at the characteristics of the pipe itself.
Oh,
But as you get more data and as you start going through this process, you'll be able to look at geographic trends and things of that nature. I have no doubt. I'm sure that, the pipes behave very differently down here than they do up in the hills. So, yeah.
You want a motion?
Well, looking around, anybody else?
I'm just, this
Amazing.
part of, the whole project's important, but this part is really important to me. The I&I is really important to me, the creek crossings is really important, the manholes. So, this is, and this money is going to save us money. So,
This is
you make money and you save money.
How you become a small
It's a win-win.
collections unit of the future or whatever.
It's slightly below budget, what we had budgeted even several years ago, so.
Seeing no public, do we have a motion?
I'd move to accept Infrastructure Asset Management Plan, IAMP, Phase 1 status update, and authorizing general manager upon review and approval of legal counsel to execute task orders 6 through 9 with HDR Engineering Incorporated to the total amount of $575,845 for Phase 2 of the IAMP update and program support services.
Anybody second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passed.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Have a nice drive to Santa Cruz.
Thanks for moving charge of this.
Yes, I really do want to thank Patrick, Bill Kelly, a lot of credit and recognition for his project management internally of this, and coordinating me as the engineer and Nexus is the ops chief. And I think what we're doing is novel. you know, we're actually really bringing knowledge of staff of our system into the capital and O&M plan. I think some of that's been done before, but, you know, I think we're just continuing and improving on that, that approach here, and we're proud of that. And so thank you for Patrick for all your work and keeping the project minded, you know, do a lot of meeting arrangements and keeping in touch, lots of communications, and so, yeah, it's a team effort.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think in the interest of, we've been sitting here for 3 hours, we can take another few-minute break.
I'm gonna go pick up my son.
And then we need to pick up the son.
It's too late, right?
I'll go to Santa Cruz.
Break. Let's come back here in 4 or 5 minutes.
In order to do my task, shall I take this over?
Report out. Finance Committee. Oh, that would be us.
That'd be us. Okay, the Finance Committee reviewed the CAFR, and we didn't have any questions on it. We did go into the interim financial statements and talked about changing some of the labels to make them more clear, but everything looked fine to us. Then we reviewed in some detail and kind of different information the infrastructure asset management program. And we had a lot of comments on the district financial policies, which will come up later.
Okay. Facilities Committee. Well, we already kind of went over it, but we met and we came up with a hypothetical plan to enlarge the entrance and talk about the build-outs. And that's been presented, and we got to see that tonight, so enough said about that. Sanitation
Let me
agency.
start with the ad hoc subcommittee. We met at 6:30. Really, it was nothing more than a procedural event. The representative from San Rafael said the documentation really required us to meet and discuss, and we hadn't, per se, really. So we met and we discussed, and we agreed on the withdrawal language for Larkspur. That's now before us, coming before us tonight.
What was the holdup on that?
It was
What got changed?
We didn't have an actual meeting. I mean, we did have a meeting, we talked about it all the time in the meetings,
Yeah.
but we didn't have a specific meeting to specifically discuss the specific, that was it. It was the procedural issue of having the meeting. And there was a couple of,
year.
yeah, and there was a couple of small word changes that pleased the representative from San Rafael, and so that's now done. So now we're going to go around and vote on it again, and then that'll be the end of it. And
That's another accomplishment.
it is, and it's something that we wanted and I wanted, and you know, I love Larkspur, and I really love Dan Miller. I wish Dan could stay on, but I just didn't think Larkspur should be on. But anyway, we did that. We talked about the agency pension and OPEB benefit plans, and we also suggested, both Michael and I suggested, that the general manager contact you, Steve, or Felicia, and talk about what you like or don't like about GovInvest software, and whether it might make sense for them to get a demonstration of GovInvest software. And if they did, would there be any savings if maybe some other agencies started using GovInvest? Could we have some sort of a sharing agreement with GovInvest? At any rate, you know, I think that their OPEB plan is not as good as ours. We're in better shape here, but we're addressing it over there as well, and I'm grateful for that. They also talked about the impact during the public safety power shutoffs. They were fine. There were no real major problems. The current technology we have does not allow for our, because we are self-generating power, but when the power goes out, it doesn't, it's weird. We have to have a backup generator. It's just the technology doesn't work. When the power shuts down, the automatic system doesn't kick in or that way. We may have that done with the new cogen that we're getting, but the old cogen, which blew up and has been repaired, doesn't have the technology. And the diesel power doesn't have the technology to know that either. So anyway, we ran out of diesel power for some days.
It just
But-
can't react fast
Yeah.
enough to bring it up to speed to allow the plant to continue if we're just going on biogas and saying, okay, if we need the diesel generator to go, it can't make that decision quick enough. But with our new cogen engine that'll be installed in about a year from now, that's gonna be designed into that whole system. And whether we can retrofit it into this one remains to be seen.
And the interesting part about that is, we're just starting the design process of the new cogen, and this wouldn't come up. So this event brought that to the forefront, and so now, so that worked out well. They talked about a deferred compensation plan. The employees have an opportunity for deferred compensation. One of the main things is there were some options as to whether we would direct one or two, and our financial subcommittee, in conjunction with both our reps, suggested let's stay out of that. So they can have their own options, and they're going to choose their own deferred compensation plans, and it will be managed, but it won't be, nobody's directing them to do anything. That's really about it. We had the financial reports, but there was nothing similar to here. They had good, clean financials, and so that was expected and desired.
North Bay Watershed Association, bring it away, Pam.
So it was a great meeting. Michael Montgomery was there, who is the state water board. I guess he's the new dude. Anyway, he was a great speaker, very knowledgeable, real kind of comfortable, could ask all kinds of questions, very available. So I'm just gonna, I took a bunch of notes, but I'm just gonna briefly touch on some that I thought they were rather important. He did talk a lot about groundwater quality, stormwater, and some wastewater issues, climate change, and water resilience. Let's see, he talked about down in the South Bay, a lot of developments going on, so they're really paying attention so that the water doesn't get contaminated from all that development. And talked about some recycled water policies and sampling of wells. Let's see what else. Did talk a little bit about 80% of trash. You're trying to capture that much trash from stormwater. And talked about a little bit about Measure A and where some of that money's going, and restoration projects in the bay. I also talked about potable water down to 0.8. I imagine that's 0.8 of a gallon for toilets. And some regional collaboration. And that's just sort of it in a nutshell.
Okay, verbal report by board member and staff, and requests for future items.
You okay?
Yeah, I just have a cough. I'd just like to point out that we have received that the Ross Valley Sanitary District was selected as a small collection system of the year by the Redwood Empire section of California Water and Environment Association. Yay! And we have our head of operations over there who can't wipe that grin off his face.
I might have mentioned it a couple times at work.
I have a board item.
Okay, go for it.
Well, I had dinner with my sewer sisters and from another district, and all their board packets are online. And I'm not that savvy on the computer, but I'm willing to change because I think for the staff to spend, I don't even want to know how many hours putting these together, right? Copying, dispense, blah, blah, blah. Could we maybe pilot it? Or is anybody else interested in it? I know there's ways
You mean only on computer?
Yeah. And you can put little notes in the computer, right, next to it as you're reading, and there's some kind of systems or something. But anyway, I'm just wondering if we're going to be one of the best sanitary districts, maybe we should start, I mean, if they're doing it and they're happy with it, then I thought maybe we should, or think about it, maybe.
I'd be happy to contribute information to that. So the packet is posted online at the same time that it's distributed to the board in paper. So we can definitely look at that and maybe give you some, one-on-one tips on how you might want to access it electronically. I do know some other agencies also provide, iPads or, other kinds of tablets
That's
to
true.
board members in lieu of paper packets being distributed, so that might be a decision point for a future board discussion. But in the meantime, Director Meigs, I'd be happy to review the electronic packet with you.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking it to help us.
It is available and can be used that way.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, and certainly, we'll accommodate whatever individual board members prefer in terms of paper copies or electronic,
Well, how much time does it take? I see you've got it all numbered.
It's assembled either way. I mean,
It's about a half a
but, I find that a lot of times when we're talking about different items, I find myself going back and forth and putting my finger here and going up 10 pages.
And then I need Julie to tell me which chapter I'm on, the wrong one, it's helpful. No, I still like to get it. I mean, I had access to it online, and I sometimes I have it here and.
And when, in my role as a board member, when I was a board member, I did both. But that was a personal preference.
Yep.
For that reason, sometimes it's helpful just to have a paper copy and then maybe electronic, and, so you can look at two different things at once.
I kind of like to write on the paper.
Yeah.
Also for me,
Right.
being I'm in that
I don't
industry,
care.
and I spend a lot of time in front of that computer. And by the end of the day, I love to have paper in front of me so I can fall asleep with it on my chest. I can't do that while I'm sitting. Anyway, I'm sure, we can, let's think about it and see what other people are doing. And maybe have it available for those board members.
Sure. Good. Any other reports from the board?
I also forgot, I'd asked a couple of times for the Water Alliance people to come out and do a little presentation, and I hadn't heard back. I sent you what you wanted, who they are and all that. And I ran into her again. So is that gonna happen, you think, or is it just, I'm just curious where we're at with that.
Yes, I never heard from her, so I can reach out to her.
Oh, okay.
But I know that her area of focus is on creeks and development near creeks. And so there's, I'm interested in having a conversation with her. I was expecting her to call me, and I hadn't heard from her, about what she thinks the interface with her activities is with the sanitary district. And open to that discussion.
Okay, great.
Any other? Well, from a verbal report from the GM, I'll just note a couple things. You noted the award from the Redwood Empire section, Small Collection System of the Year. And that's the Redwood Empire is Solano County, Napa County, Sonoma County, Marin County, Mendocino County, Lake County, Humboldt County, and Del Norte. So it covers a big swath of the state. And that's one section of the state. And so the next step is we're in the running for Small Collection System of the Year for the whole state, because we got nominated by Redwood. So we'll see where we go. And congratulations to Stephen Nixis, who put together the application.
And when is that announced?
This,
A couple months.
this thing?
Couple of months, is that?
Yeah, the awards are, for the first one is in January, and then it goes to the state review board and the board of CWA for final.
That was appropriate, Steve, you can have another cupcake.
And then we want to just real quickly note that there was a meeting of LAFCO, Local Agency Formation Commission, on December 12th. And LAFCO approved the Marin Park annexation to the district.
Very cool. What does that mean in reality of consolidation?
Functionally, we'll be consolidated on July 1st. And there's some procedural issues for them to become officially part of the district. There has to be a state approval by the Board of Equalization, which they only meet once a year or something like that, and that doesn't happen until December. So there's a little bit of a disjoint. So functionally, we'll be treating them like the part of the district, so we can give things like lateral grants to people in Murray Park that we couldn't do before that. So, anyway, that was an important step.
Well, one of the important parts of Murray Park, and when it comes to San Quentin, we have no real problem right now, but they also have to be voters. So that has to be, they have to be voters.
Who does?
Murray Park.
Becomes members of our district.
Yeah, they have to, so they have to be, so that would, the elections department's gotta be, on top of that.
Funds
That'll happen next year.
And funds are transferred when?
So, may I?
Yes.
Yeah, so there's a two-step process, like Steve was mentioning, just because of the timing of the Board of Equalization. So our arrangement with the county is that we'll take over functionally operations of the district, and we'll also receive, they have a capital reserve fund that they'll transfer over to us.
500,000, was it?
380. We'll get that in July of 2020. And then the Board of Equalization will meet, as Steve mentioned, in December of 2020. And then for the following fiscal year, we'll start getting their property taxes and
Service charges.
and service charges. And then they'll become probably voters at that point. Is my guess. No, I don't think that will happen in 2020. I think that'll happen in 2021.
Well, that's fine, because it's not an election that year, and then besides the census will be done, and so the
Right.
Good. And then I wanted to make a quick note that tomorrow is our end of year party, our seasonal party, that on the exact time of commencement is noon. Okay, that's simple. So you're all invited to join us and staff to enjoy some festivities. And that's all I have.
Okay. Consent calendar. Matters listed under this item are considered routine and will be enacted by one motion. The consent calendar may include resolutions, therefore the motion, second, and vote will also be applicable to the resolutions and recorded accordingly. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless requested by a member of the board or the public prior to the time the board votes on the motion to adopt. The public, anybody?
I'd like to pull D.
Okay. Okay, let's go to 10D.
Okay,
Steve.
this is more or less a procedural recommendation just for efficiency that when there are claims filed against the district for $50,000 or less, that you delegate the authority to settle to staff or the general manager. And for claims above that amount, go to board acceptance or board approval. But the resolution explains that, the proposed resolution explains that nothing contained herein shall prevent the board of directors from reviewing, considering, or acting upon any claim or litigation matter as it's at its sole and absolute discretion. So this doesn't take the board out of the decision-making for those smaller claims. It's just a recommendation we have for efficiency.
How many-
Do you have anything to add to that in terms of past practice, Felicia?
Well,
Or council?
yeah, I mean, I could just say that since I've been working in the district since 2016, staff has routinely processed these claims in conjunction with our insurance carrier. We've got a claims adjuster, working with our operations and maintenance staff will determine the legitimacy of the claim. The claims adjuster will determine if the claim falls within our insurance coverage and whether the amount being requested is reasonable, so he knows how much it costs per square foot to replace hardwood floors, for example, or replace a particular fixture or whatnot. And then it falls within our, what we call self-insured retention amount, which in our case is $50,000. And so these are all, again, approved administratively within the administrative process. Where the board would get involved is if there was a dispute, much like if you recall the restaurant in San Anselmo, and then there's a threat of litigation because we think we should deny the claim, then that can all the board. Otherwise, I think some other examples would be, routine sort of workers' compensation, insurance claims can also be processed under this administrative authority. But the main point about this particular item is that in my tenure here, it come to my attention that there didn't seem to be a resolution of actual delegation of authority to staff by the board, and it was general counsel's recommendation that according to the government code, we should have that in our record. And so we're asking the board to have that in our record. There's no change in process.
Is there any amount that is currently administratively approved? Are we changing this amount?
No, it's up to $50,000 currently. Because that's our self-insured, that's basically our deductible.
Deductible. Okay, but you're saying, let me clarify a couple things. You're saying that we don't have a policy, not that we do have a policy.
We have a procedure, but we don't have a delegation of authority. So we're
You've
not
been doing it this way, but
Yes.
it hasn't been written down.
This is also one of those things that my presumption is that at some point it occurred and it exists, and it could be that we're unable to either locate the document or figure out exactly when it was resolved, because this is a pretty standard kind of ministerial thing that the government code allows agencies to do and they routinely do it. So this
We wouldn't want to see every claim that comes against the district,
Right.
and our constituents wouldn't want to have to wait a month to have their claims reviewed.
How many claims do you have in the last 12 months or 24 months?
We get about 1 a month, 2 a month, on
Yeah.
average, yeah.
And
I mean, however many SSOs we have, right? Because
or
that's
backups?
backups. Again, workers' comp claims, 1 a month, 2 a month.
How much a
And we
year?
process them in batches.
In dollars?
dollars.
Yeah.
It ranges. I mean, there's some pretty expensive hardwood floors in Ross, so, you've got a backup in a nice house, and it, ruins somebody's, family room.
Could we get an annual report on this?
Sure.
I'd be more comfortable if we delegated that authority, I can understand that, but I'd like to see what we're doing over the course of a year.
Sure.
I mean, don't we every month, it's in the check register?
Yeah. But that's
It's a
not,
lump payment to CSRMA,
Okay.
yeah. So you'd have to look at the individual invoices to see the individual claims, but I can produce that report for you. I can produce that with the financial, monthly financials.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Any
So,
further
but
on
also some claims can be dismissed, right, or dropped without the board ever knowing what they are. Is that true?
We usually just resolve them. We usually negotiate them, and if we can't negotiate them, then that's when there's a dispute, and that's when it definitely comes to the board. Because if the insurance claims adjuster can't resolve it with the customer, then it's potential litigation, and then it requires board action.
Okay. So we're gonna continue it? Is that right?
Continue it?
We're gonna vote to adopt it.
Yeah.
We are?
Well,
I thought we were gonna come back. I thought you were gonna.
No, I asked for the managers to give us an annual report on claims.
And I can include that in the monthly financials. So basically a breakdown of payment to CSRMA on claims payments.
You've seen this all along. And CSRMA, provides this service for dozens, if not more, districts around the state. So this is a routine action, so that's why I was on consent.
Yeah.
And they charge us generally quarterly, so you won't see it monthly, but when we do get the bill from CSI, they itemize it in the monthly financial.
I'm good with that. If it has a problem at that point, we'll take a look at it. Is that okay with you?
No,
Okay, well, let's.
yeah.
What do you want?
Go ahead on your motion.
Well, no, I mean, we want-
Well,
what's-
I guess
the issue?
before, I guess I'm a little concerned that none of this information has been coming to the board. And
It has.
now.
It has
now-
through the CSRMA line item, so there's nothing unaccounted.
I guess so now the manager will take over making these decisions on these particular claims.
No,
No,
they're already
when
doing
we
it.
researched this, it's been done like this all along. What Andrea noted is that it wasn't specifically in our policies. So,
So there's nothing new,
No,
nothing different?
no.
But through this discussion, the board
Oh,
has
we're gonna
told
get
us
more
you're
information now.
interested in a little more granular information.
We'll
on
get more
claims.
information than we've had in the past.
And it's available.
and I'm fine with that really once a year as an agenda, quick agenda. I don't want to see that on the consent. I'd like to see it as a regular agenda item. It's just once a year. Just breeze through it.
Or I could, like I said, I can put it in the monthly financials when the quarterly
Yeah,
payment
yeah,
to
it's fine.
CSRMA comes up, I'll just itemize.
Okay.
4 times a year.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
Okay.
fine. And it'll just be part of the financial report.
All right. Fair enough.
Much like the lateral grants and the lateral loans, those itemized payments out.
And that's why I called you today.
Yeah.
We had the financial reports and my
Well,
eyes
Let's come back to
went
that.
long, so
Okay.
I thought there was a $150,000 loan for a.
Oh, right, yeah. Always have to answer any questions about the monthly
I know,
financial.
okay.
Ask them to do it.
Are there any more questions?
No.
Okay,
I move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Consideration of item 14.
Financial policies.
You recall we had on the October board agenda, a draft set of financial policy updates and had some discussion and direction from the board in October. And are now coming back to you with a red line strikeout version of our existing financial policies that were updated 2018.
I think it's 2017.
2017, so this is a 2-year update, and we incorporated the direction, and now have before you proposal for adoption. And with that, do you have any other comments?
Just that this item was presented to the Finance Committee, and I noted a couple of places for edits. It'll be on page 242 and 245, which I will tell you what those are in just a moment. And then also, there was some discussion about the honoraria ban, and it was determined that that payment is not from district funds, but from other agency or entity funds. So on page 242, it was recommended that we delete the phrase by the bond trustee and the red underline. And on page 245, it was recommended that we put a maximum of $250,000 for the negotiable CDs, that those are FDIC insured, and that the placement service deposits are also pooled funds. And other than that,
Yeah, repurchase agreements, is that what you said? See,
I'm sorry, repurchase agreements, yes,
we don't want the district doing repurchase agreements.
right.
But the pooled funds, like LAIF, has, repurchase agreements and commercial paper, things like that.
Thank you, Tom, I misread
Yeah,
it.
that's fine for them, we don't want to do it locally. They've got finance investment managers there.
Thank you, Tom, for understanding all of this stuff, because I glaze over.
So it's almost like we took the list that Leif does and incorporated it into the policy.
It's a government code.
Whereas Leif really takes care of that, and the
Yeah.
district wouldn't do that. actually.
Yeah, the
So it's a
district
good
would,
clarification.
unless somebody's an expert on repurchase agreements, I doubt it.
Not a subject matter.
So that concludes our recommended edits to the financial policies for this review period.
Yeah, and a lot of these edits, the red lines came up from last
Right.
month's review.
That's right.
Yes,
Okay.
And from financial subcommittee, I'm assuming. And
yes.
I appreciate the 3.8 board members not being compensated for signing a check. That's,
Yes.
What?
So this, by the way, this is a lot of work, and it really is a good job. I recommend, finish?
Yeah, I think
I
so.
recommend-
Wait, hang on, just a sec. We good for,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
and again, good for credit rating.
Go for it, Tom.
Okay, I move that that we adopt the attached financial policies with the recommended additional changes and the red line.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, that was an aye?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. 15, discussion and direction on Ross Valley Sanitary District Board policies.
Good, well, as we talked about during the business plan, and came out of board discussion with staff over the last few board meetings, we proposed to look at the board policies and really assemble them in one place. And take advantage of that opportunity also to target a couple of suggestions for either a new policy for adopting provisions on state legislation and modification of an existing policy, working with district staff and consultants. So we have that in the attached staff report, and I want to give credit to Julia, the board clerk, for helping us pull together the board policies that have been recently adopted, as well as some historic ones, and we did a analysis of those just to confirm they were not really relevant to what board action is vis-a-vis staff action, like doing environmental impact reports is a good thing. So also I want to thank Andrea Clark for helping get us up to speed on some of the history, recent history on board policy updates. So what we assembled with their assistance is the current stack of board policies with, as I mentioned, those two proposed modifications, but no action is requested of the board today. This is a discussion and direction meeting, and we have time to review what we put together and get comments either verbally now or there's time before the January board meeting when we propose to make an adoption and have a benchmarked current compendium of board policies that you all had a chance to review and concur with. And that's it.
Board?
I have a process question. In the past, in our history, we had a policy committee, am I right? And I was wondering, were the changes reviewed by, do we have a policy committee first of all? I thought we did, maybe we don't. But was it reviewed by any board members or was this all done at the staff level? These changes or requests for changes?
Well, this is a staff report, and what we're doing is a two-part process, where we have this meeting where we have discussion and direction among the board members, public forum, on proposed changes that we, staff, put together based on board input.
Okay. On board input.
We're just going to
From
discuss,
previous discussions this year.
we're not adopting these.
No.
tonight.
No, I know, I'm
We're
just
discussing.
talking about the process, that's all.
So can I,
Thank
have
you.
all these policies have either been adopted by the board or in the.
Or changes.
Or changes, and the two changes, one
Right.
of them relates to.
Okay.
Both of them relate to items
So
that
they
the board
haven't
has
really
discussed
been,
over the
they
last
haven't
3 or
really
4
been
months.
vetted yet, totally.
These changes, not, this is your first.
That's all I wanted to know. And
first
then
of the change.
I had a question on this. Well, I have 3 questions. Do you want to go over them individually, or how do you want to do this?
Yes.
Yeah,
Michael?
please. go
Okay,
for it.
so on page 283, it says Board Professional Development Training and Education.
Well, 283.
283.
Yeah, yeah, 283. Yeah. So you kind of have to go back and forth, but this, because I want to just point out this, on letter C, what is a biannual board self-assessment? What is this? I don't know, I don't remember it. I'm curious what it is. I don't think we've ever done it. Does anybody know?
We haven't been doing it biannually, I can tell you that right now.
I've never done it. It's interesting though, it talks about adopting a self-assessment tool to utilize in the process of a workshop to review the assessment and work on those issues identified. So, yeah, I'm just curious, what does that mean?
Well,
And I don't have any memory of it.
Yeah, if I might just jump in and say, I did note that this particular policy, which was adopted on October 26th of 2016, certainly it predates the general manager in my tenure. Well, I guess I'd been a staff member at the district for a month at that point. But
3 days.
a little bit, yeah. And so I don't know if Andrea can provide any insight on it.
It's not specifically on
Or
IFC,
something.
but go ahead.
Many years ago, when we first got on the board, Tom and I, and Pam was already on the board, Greg Norby did a few different things where we had some people come in and did some self-analysis tools, and we were gonna share them and work it all. And we did the process of doing it, but we never actually did anything with it.
Okay.
We had the fellow from Tracy, who was the mayor, what's his name?
I can't just count it as
Yeah.
Brett Ives.
Brett
Ives.
Yeah.
He came in and, you know, gave us a rah-rah how the boards work, but we never actually,
So this might have been a recommendation
it
from that.
It could have been, but I can't tell you.
You know, we do the ethics training and the harassment prevention training
Yeah.
every other year.
That's right.
I know.
But maybe,
I love it.
this is, you know, new board member orientation. We had a little tour, that's about it.
Yeah, well, they gave us a binder,
Oh, binder.
was it, I think, binder.
This probably needs some help.
Yeah.
Sounds like
I was like, maybe it needs
Yeah.
to be deleted, I don't know.
Well,
Okay.
No, it's good input, and actually, this is useful.
This is
Because
what
we strongly encourage you to review the
Yeah.
policies that have been recently adopted, and
We could ask
whether they're
Brett
relevant.
Ives, I'm sure.
You know, you talked about discussions on policy 3, I'd agree to get rid of the DVD.
Where are you, what page?
Page
270?
270, thank you.
Hang on, did we go through?
Maybe we ought to get into order here, you know? 'Cause-
Bouncing back and forth is fun.
Okay.
All right, so, yes, I would agree with the suggestion that we get rid of the DVDs offer. People can get it, but I'd also like to change number 3 to, is the plan, intention, hope of the board to live stream when possible? In other words, I'm hoping in the new building we can live stream.
Yeah,
Well,
me
why don't
too.
we could say in the future, but, you know, why don't we see if we can live stream or how to do it, and then put it down as.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
Do you want to take out the DVD?
Yeah.
Why?
We put online.
It's online.
Yeah, I guess, but somebody
And I
wanted
gotta
a
tell you
copy,
something,
what if somebody wanted a copy of our meeting? We used to provide that, I'm just saying.
I'm sorry,
I know, it's probably,
hold on.
it's ancient.
How many requests have we gotten in the last 5
Oh,
years?
jokes.
No,
One?
the new.
One? Really? When was that?
The DVDs on.
makes requested.
You did.
I did? When? Earlier this year, really?
You mean you didn't watch the whole thing?
No, no.
I think we should get it.
The fact of the matter
If
is,
somebody called up and asked for one, we could have.
DVDs are going away. Everybody's streaming, it's available live to
Not
stream,
everybody.
except for Tom. But once you get your pipe dug all the way to the street, and then you get it, then maybe you'll join the rest of the 21st century. Whenever that happens.
Yes, you pointed
That's kind
out,
of vague, isn't it?
there is Julia put together a nice summary table on
Yeah.
attachment
Yes.
A, which is
Yeah.
page 266. So it
Yep.
gives you an idea that
Love it.
the changes that are contemplated.
Yeah.
And also the breadth of the board
Edit
policy.
to remove DVD service.
So listen,
Yeah, I was agreeing with it.
I would suggest,
I read that.
oh,
I wanted to change that we also talk about, but I can wait, I'm fine with waiting.
I would
till we get
suggest
into it.
that we take the next 4 weeks and go over these at our leisure, and
Okay, but we can make comments now.
you can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
Um,
we're taking notes.
Okay, so on page 272, by attending, okay, right at the top, AB 1230, by attending a 2-hour training, you can do it on computer or online.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's true.
Something like that, or online. And then,
Or you could just say, look, the state requires certain ways to have it done, so by whatever way the state will certify and give us that little certificate.
sure.
Whether they come and, we had, our attorneys came and gave us
Well, that's right.
a special meeting, whether we do it at a CASA conference or a CSDA conference, or however, that just once every 2 years, we have to do it, however it gets done,
Yeah.
certified by the state. That leaves
And
it
I
open.
would note back on the board professional development policy, we do also cover this, so it's possible that this whole policy on ethics training policy and procedure may not be, maybe redundant.
Less policies, the better.
Are we ready to move on?
Go for it, please.
274, there's a typo.
Yeah, we got those. There's
You
2
got those
typos.
already? Okay.
It should be shall instead of should.
And then I wanted to go over, oh Lord.
If I can talk about 274, I don't think we need to do this, I'm just saying, since directors are elected officials, no director may delegate his or her authority to act as a director. In fact, when I was on town council, they had an emergency procedure, and you had a backup in case you were in Tahoe and the town was getting flooded and they needed to have, so they actually did it. So it's not, I think that's stated as a fact. I'd be fine with this policy, but I don't think it's actually, I think you could, in an emergency situation, delegate authority, if we so desired.
Makes sense.
Okay, well, I don't know how someone did it.
It might be helpful to reference something from the emergency policy in that policy.
Okay. But again, it's not an issue here, so.
Like a disaster. Okay, 287, this is the one about the, is this the one where the board president gets a CC email? Is this,
That was the last one, 20. Is that what you're talking about?
that the manager CCs the board president on
No.
emails? Isn't that this one?
Yes.
Yeah, page 287.
So I did a little research. What I usually do is try and learn from example. And I know a lot of people, I'm pretty amazed how many elected officials I actually know, including mayors and ex-mayors and a lot of more attorneys, and I'm friends with Larry Bragman, and he's on the water board. None of them allow this practice. And they were a bit set back and shocked that I was actually asking if they had a policy or did that. Absolutely no. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that well, that's what I'm just saying. As a community,
Which part of it don't
even all the
you
way
like?
up to Novato,
Hmm?
where else? I mean, I just, yeah. And I talked with a lot of mayors, so I'm just saying, there's none of this going on out there because of the concern of the Brown Act.
I have to agree. I don't like this policy at all. I don't think it's appropriate. I don't think it's right.
Do you think that you should be able to contact staff?
No. I can tell you what I think the policy should be. I should be able to contact the general manager, and because of the position, perhaps the assistant general manager, maybe because I have a financial question, but other than that, no. I don't think we can or should contact staff outside of, Steve is at a ad hoc meeting with us on outreach to the public, fine. But would I call Steve up in the middle of the week? No, I would not. I never have. I've never contacted anybody I ask you detailed questions like, can you print something, or can I get this, or something like that, and as clerk of the board, I don't think that's an issue. But when it comes to any questions at all, I've only contacted the general manager and the assistant general manager. And I don't intend to email anybody. I'm not going to email the board. I'm not going to. I can tell you right now, I'm not going to. That puts me in a position of violating the Brown Act, because maybe I've spoken to Steve with something about, I may have called Mary Silver, and now we're violating the Brown Act. You're causing me to violate the Brown Act. Or you're compelling me to email the board president, so now I can't talk to Mary Silver. Maybe I wanted to. So I'm not doing it. I'm telling you right now, I'm not doing it.
Okay, but I think the key part of this is just doing exactly what you said you would do. The primary path of communication from board members to staff is directly, and it should be through the general manager.
I couldn't agree more, absolutely.
Okay, well, that's the key. Now, what don't you agree with?
The general manager will generally copy the board president on email communications to individual board members. No.
Okay, that part.
No. And I'm not emailing, I'm not copying the board president when I send an email to Steve. I'm not doing it. I'm not. You're curtailing my rights to communicate with other board members by doing that. And that's not right. You're causing me to possibly violate the Brown Act, either in advance or denying me, that's gotta go. And I've never seen that anywhere. I agree with Pam on that. And again, I have seen, and I was absolutely taught in sort of the town manager training, and when you get on town council, you go to Sacramento and they give you a California League of Cities training. And yeah, it's like, you don't call the chief of police up. You have a question about the chief of police, you call the town manager, and the town manager calls the chief of police, and then the town manager calls you back. You don't call the fire chief, you don't call the
So the part you don't agree with is the red stuff.
No.
Well, I think by far the most important part of this is that the primary path of communication from board members to staff is directly through the general manager.
Can I suggest that we temper that a little bit, or in his or her absence, the assistant general manager?
Yeah.
I mean,
Sure. Yeah.
But I agree with that. I mean, first off, I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
Couldn't disagree more. I mean, yeah, couldn't agree more. Yes. Not that I don't like to talk to Steve. Steve doesn't like to talk to me. Actually, I never
Well,
called
that's
Steve.
understandable.
Yeah, I've never called John. I never.
Well, I wanted to talk to somebody, and I called up Steve and said,
Right.
"Can I talk to him?"
That's precisely the matter. Yeah, because there would be a time when I would call the town manager and she would say, yeah, yeah, call the truck. That's fine. That's what the town manager decided. So that policy, I think we should absolutely have. So I get rid of the purple. That's what I was suggesting.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. Can we, should we temper this a little bit, maybe on the next page, or, which is, again, if I have a request that I get this rubber banded and not, can I call the clerk of the board and talk to her about that, you know?
That's handled under the, may approach staff directly for simple
Okay,
informational, can I get this Band-Aid,
yeah, okay,
yeah. I think that's covered there.
Oh, yeah, for simple information.
okay.
Certainly, the general manager doesn't want to know. You need to get pay-per-click versus.
What do you think about this, Steve? Is there a need for the general manager to CC the?
Well, this is based on experience in Marin County, actually, with school boards. The board president is the only point of communication with the superintendent of the school district.
Really?
Yes. So, and maybe not all school districts, but I just know from personal experience. So I thought it was a way, because having been a board member for over 10 years myself, having the chair or the president, which is sort of a point of contact with the general manager, just be aware of communications of other board members so that they're not caught off guard. Because as board president, you have a certain role that's kind of elevated like a mayor. So there is precedence, but it's just an idea to keep the chair or the president of the board aware of board staff communications. That's it. And so it doesn't have, it's just a proposal for discussion, and I heard the input.
Yeah.
I think what we did was, we didn't put it on the board members to figure out the Brown Act implications of the communications, but rather put it on staff to
But
make
you
sure
wouldn't
we
know.
manage it.
Well, we would.
So
How would you know that I called Mary Silva about the issue?
He could
and
ask
then-
you. What if he asked you, can I CC the board president on this? And you'd say, no, I've already spoken with board member X.
I'd rather not do that.
Ask you a
I'd rather
question.
not do that.
This is just.
If I want to call the general manager, I want to call the general manager. I don't,
Hang on, I have a question, because this is just for my edification. Is every communication between three members Brown Act violation? Or,
No, potentially. I mean, if you guys are talking about, what restaurant to go to for lunch, to talk about, in preparation for talking about some district, wait, what time does closed session start? Probably not, but anything that is a matter that's within the jurisdiction of the agency, yeah, potentially. So, yeah, I mean, the Brown Act concerns are, I mean, this doesn't necessarily create violations of the Brown Act. Does it heighten the need for awareness of potential Brown Act violations through communications? Yeah. It requires that the general manager and that the board members be, exercise a lot of discretion and think about the communication.
yeah, absolutely.
Right, which at some level they should be doing, but yes, it creates a heightened need for vigilance.
If Tom is going to have a medical procedure, and Tom shares that with Doug, I mean, this is hypothetical, and I don't want to go back. And then Tom calls the general manager and says, I'm going to have this thing done, and the general manager, in order to let me know that we're not going to have, a fourth person here, because I didn't talk to Tom. So now three of us know that Tom is going to have.
But that's not a matter before the board. It's not on the agenda.
That's what I'm saying.
But it doesn't have to be a matter, it doesn't have to be something on the agenda for it to be brought up.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's like, hey, let's talk about our policy. No, probably not, because it doesn't implicate anything sort of in the mission or in the jurisdiction.
Let's just have a very heightened awareness of.
Yeah, so yeah, it does require additional vigilance.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you're automatically violating the Brown Act, but it does make that more of a possibility than otherwise would be, because you're automatically
Okay.
having two instead of just one more.
Can I make this simple? every single solitary time I call the general manager or the assistant general manager, I've already spoken to another board member. That's my policy. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. So that's, I'm not doing it.
You're not doing,
I'm not doing that.
well, you're not voting to do it.
I'm not gonna do it. We're not copying my emails or my conversations. We're not, I'm not.
Well, look at it. You
Not having that.
don't, relax, I'm just asking.
I'm trying to move on. I'm trying to make my policy.
But, let's say that, for instance, I mean, no, forget it.
No, that's okay. I can kind of see your point here.
Okay.
It's not important to me, the general manager contacts other board members. Okay, well, let's see. Oh, yeah. 293. California Association of Sanitation Agencies.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm trying to sign where 15 is again. What page is 15? I just want to see what those are again.
293.
State legislation.
No.
Oh, what do you?
No, number 15, working with district staff and consultants, it was a consultant's part, keep with edits from council. What page is that on? Do you know?
287.
Thank you.
287.
Oh, that's what we're just looking at, okay, because I thought, I realized the district staff, I didn't realize the consultant's part, so I saw it over here as consultants, okay, thank you. And then the new one, number 20, didn't we talk about that the last time? I think that,
Well, we probably should get rid of that.
You hadn't seen language, you talked about it, and this is the first time you seen language that would reflect your discussion.
yeah, and I think that, I'm on 21, the last one,
Okay, but what page?
the 293.
293.
And so, we talked about that, and I think I was happy, with what we came up with, which was, if we're going to write our letter or use our name on behalf of any state legislature, it comes before the board. If it's at the last minute and it can't, then I'm okay with that. I wanted the broad board to be brought to attention, but I also think, as Mary said, and I asked the board president and the general manager to use some discretion. A lot of times people tell us we need things at the last minute. They don't really need things at the last minute. You know, these legislative things take, a year and a half, and they're looking for a letter on day 1 minute, 1 second one. It's like, you know what? We could be in, but I'm okay with the way this was rewritten. I'm okay with it. Does anybody?
I'm thinking. I agree, Mary made a very good point, lobbyists are like, the sky is falling all the time, and, they send you literature in the mail as well, the sky is falling, and in the recent one that happened, even though the letter went to Sacramento, it was in committee, and at that time, it had not passed, but it has now passed. So, I just think it's a good practice that we try and not always think the sky is falling, but there might be a situation when it occurs. So in essence, what this says is, if they feel it's urgent, usually it's the CSBA people, correct? Is that the most of it, the legislation? There's other, could there be other legislation? Oh, it says state at the top, never mind. That this is a backup plan that now makes it legitimate that we're saying in a policy that the manager and the chair are going to sign it. Either one way or the other. Maybe a yes, maybe a no. But I think they're all gonna say that.
Well, the key here for me is that if that happens, then the board becomes aware of it. And so
Right.
we'll know, and if we see 3 of these in a row, it's like, okay, let's
Right.
stop this.
Yeah.
We'll know. So
Well, that's a good point. So when this happens, I'm assuming we would be notified, right? As a board?
In the case of this.
Okay.
It says it right here. It
Because
is.
I don't think we were notified.
Absolutely not the truth.
No, we
We
weren't.
were?
There's absolutely no.
Yeah, that's how
we
it
found
blew
out
up.
about it.
That's how we all blew up.
At the very next meeting, on the verbal reports out, Steve told us exactly what had happened, and we were provided with copies of the letter.
I found out at a conference.
Well then,
That might have been before the meeting. No, it came up at the next meeting. I know.
Okay, yeah.
And a copy of said letter shall be included for mental purposes.
And if a board member feels they don't agree, they can go talk to them as a constituent.
You always have a right to do that.
Right.
we always have the right to do that. But I mean, even if three out of the five of us want
Then it
to
is.
decide to do it, then it's board approved, and it doesn't, the other two people, you know, then you can go as a constituent, you're exactly right. But as a board, we just need a majority to say we're gonna do this. Whoever the board members are.
Mhm.
Okay. So this is gonna come back up next month. Does anybody have any others that they'd like to discuss this evening?
No.
I would suggest that any edits or thoughts that you have should go to Felicia in the next month.
Probably Julia or Steve, but I'm
Julia or
going
Steve?
to accept.
You decide,
As well.
who should they go to?
It's up to you, Steve.
Yeah, send it to me.
Send them to Steve,
Steve.
and then we'll have them for discussion at the next
You
meeting.
put them in green.
Put them in green.
It's funny, the color of red line is always selected by the software.
Yeah.
I don't know
Oh,
why they're
it is.
reading. Yeah,
Oh, right.
can't really guarantee the color of this red line.
I think when you use a copy machine, red doesn't show up terribly well.
Especially now when you fax it.
Copy.
Okay, so do we have anything to do, do we have to tell you anything?
They'll come back.
No, we appreciate the input. It's all for discussion and consideration, deliberation, and next month we'll have the package based on the input we received for your proposed adoption. So thank you.
16, consideration of accepting the year-end capital report for fiscal year 2018/19.
This is a companion report. Again, it's the snapshot of our capital program expenditures at the end of last fiscal year, which in these dynamic times, you know, a lot's gone on since that time. Been a busy summer, so many more expenditures. You can see even like with the Larkspur Landing project, within one of the tables in here, you see that we're just getting started with the first draw on the construction project, $30,000 in June 19. This is on page 313, which shows all of the different capital projects and a month-by-month accounting for all the expenditures on them. And so this was, just as a quick example, that's actually page 313. So I want to thank Patrick for helping with this. He helped Catherine with it last year, where we worked with the accounting department, Melvin Garcia and staff there, to make sure the numbers are right. But this then gives a nice annual tracking of the capital program. The first one was last year, because I think staff had reached a point where, you know, instead of just doing monthly, let's do an annual synopsis. And because so much was going on, to give kind of an overall picture. We also, in this report, we feature the projects that have been completed and some pictures showing, you know, the construction of these projects to make it a little more interesting with maps and pictures instead of just a table with numbers. So it was an extraordinary year on the order of $30 million in expenditures. You know, to put that in perspective, $30 million. Our income was about $20 million on sewer service charge, about $7 million on ad valorem, plus or minus. So we spent as much, you know, we spent more than we collected in capital alone, not even talking about O&M and salary benefits and all that. So it's been aggressive and has required the revenue bond funding to be able to afford it. And as we discussed earlier today, you know, mixing in some SRF funding makes sense too as we get through this peak capital work and begin the glide path towards a more pay-as-you-go capital program. Let's see. I think, you know, I would call attention from interested public and regulators to pages 307 and 308, which compare the plan that we talked about a little, you know, got into detail about IAMP today. You know, the 2013 IAMP was quite aggressive. It did show by this fiscal year spending $95 million, and that's on page 307.
Mm-hmm.
And we are about that much in debt. You know, the principal of 96, we're over 100 million with the premium. So we're making good on those commitments. Then on 308, you see the actuals. So the green line is the mileage of pipe repair on gravity sewer, and the orange line is the capital implementation plan. It goes beyond pipe, it includes pump stations. And so you see we're tracking pretty well, but there were a couple of years there where we were lagging behind in the homes, and then we caught up the last couple of years, if you look on that graph on the right, where we're getting close to what was originally planned way back in 6.5 years ago. So it's a good story, you know, and that lag factor had to do with, there were some challenges in terms of how the projects were packaged and lessons learned, you know. It does make sense to split them up a bit. Because if you do too large of a project going out to bid, there's a very limited pool of contractors that can have insurance bonds that cover that contract amount. So you've really whittled down and don't have as much competition for those larger projects in our niche, you know, in our sewer construction niche for smaller agencies. So lessons learned, and by dividing things up like we talked about with Butterfield or Royal Kenrick, you know, getting a third leg of the project, that gets us then into $2 to $5 million projects that more contractors can bond for, and we get a better competitive bid. And so that lesson learned kind of shows in this green line a little bit on the right, and the orange line.
On page 308.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a little Monday morning quarterback.
That's good.
Looking back with hindsight in 2020. But things are moving quickly now. Thanks a lot of great work from, you know, Catherine and the team of consultants, and, you know, and then our construction managers we meet now and then when we come to get authorization for construction management. This is a whole team, a whole community of people that is behind these results that we document.
Didn't the cease and desist say 4 miles a year? And it looks like this is more than that.
It also said, a certain dollar amount, we've exceeded that as well.
Yeah, you know, those are good points. It was the IMP that really specified the dollar amount, but we submitted the IMP as a substitute for the CDO. It gets pretty complicated. And it was accepted implicitly by the regional board. They didn't write a letter saying, we accept this in lieu of, but in the CDO they said, submit the IMP. And it was implicit that that would substitute for other strict recommendations of the CDO. So by submitting the IMP and saying, this is the money, there was sort of this commitment
Right.
that was made and pretty much met. You know, there's no dispute that we're meeting those requirements. The 4 miles a year, also, we are counting repair in that.
That's right.
So this is just capital, but the regional board accepts that if we restore a pipe based on repairs of different defects along manhole to manhole, that pipe is now restored.
And how much is that? Because you have 30.
Yeah, that's, it's comparable. You know, we came up with a number that was around 50 miles, going back to June 30th. And, you know, we're just shy of 50 miles overall.
That's a quarter of our piping.
Yeah. Yes.
It's a great report, too.
Yeah, it's a great deal of work. And so that's why we're excited about what we talked about earlier, is the hydraulic modeling. You know, let's really show the world what the predicted results are on flow, modeling an SSO, prediction or abatement, and use the model to show the world that, oh, this investment and this change in the system had quantitative results.
Very good.
Yeah.
So 0 SSO.
Yeah, well, that's the next item, but yes. So
Oh,
I can
sorry.
I move to adopt the year-end capital report for fiscal
I
year?
have to first check and see if the public.
I'm sorry.
Is there any public? Seeing none, do I hear a motion?
I move to accept the year-end capital report for fiscal year 2018.
I would love for you to do that.
I'll second.
And Tom is seconding.
I'm sorry Patrick couldn't be here to see
Yeah.
this acceptance.
I texted him.
Okay. Okay, 17.
All right, so yes, I
First,
love the
before we
numbers.
start 17. Ray Nixon.
I want you to
Mix
get a
it.
t-shirt that says no SSO on it. You get a t-shirt.
That's really good.
A big X.
I'm sorry, so let me ask you, that's last month. How are we so far this month?
Oh,
I don't want to jinx it.
Huh?
No, we're doing fine. No SSOs yet.
No comment, we got in trouble, man.
But we've run through the storms so far.
And another fun fact, which is completely different than last year, is that this fiscal year, we've only had about 367 gallons spilled with 8 SSOs.
Yeah,
So
that's
our
great.
response times are better, our
Yeah.
follow-up's better, we're concentrating on higher priority pipe. So we have the least amount of gallons spilled and that have had overflows in Marin.
How much has reached surface water?
Ooh, I'd have to look. I don't think we've had many category ones.
Very little.
It was very cool. There was one episode that we had with Pump Station 15. And where it was all brand new systems and something just wasn't dialed in yet. But our smart covers alerted to us of a potential problem. And we got to the pump station before the problem became a symptom.
Well, our Stephen Mixes alerted us
Yes.
to the problem that our smart covers alerted.
How do they alarm you? Is there like a,
It'll send out SMS texts, emails, and my phone started blowing up and Manny Vigil saved the day.
and he can tell you which one, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Send it out. All right.
Yeah, it's a great system.
He sleeps standing up.
Yeah.
Okay. There's nothing else? There's nothing else? Are we done?
Aye. We move to adjourn.
Okay.